the Permanent Working Group on Capacity and Institution Building, the CIB, has been mandated by our World Council to work on a new policy paper. We've got a document that has been tabled to the Bureau. There have been discussions already taking place among the members of the CIB, and we are bringing this discussion now to the broader group. Focusing on these three key issues. How is development cooperation changing, and does it respond also to the priorities that our constituency are identifying? What are the changes in methodology? How will we need to change the way that we did things around decentralized cooperation, city to city, association to association? And finally, what is the role that we should have? What should need to change also around financing and other mechanisms to make the kind of contribution as constituency that we make exponentially bigger? That's what is bringing us together today. This is not the last discussion we are going to have about this. There will be more discussions with other partners, but today I am very pleased to have with us many of our members, many associations that are very active in this field, and also some key partners that are going to help us with their vision. So I'll stop here because what we want is to hear from you. Your contributions will feed into the policy paper that is being researched and prepared now, and your comments will also reach the Executive Bureau on the 20th. So I look forward to hearing from you. And we had a last minute change because Peter Knip, you know, the director of VNG International, the Dutch Association of Municipalities, the external branch, is not able to reach us today because he has a medical emergency, not for himself, but someone close. And so we're very sorry to say Peter will not be with us, but we have a Stan that you know well because he has been following these discussions as well. And Stan, you will be moderating and leading the discussions, facilitating the discussions. So the floor is yours. We are in your hands, dear Stan. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks a lot, Emilia, our Secretary General, for these kind words. And also for, I think, very strongly framing the discussion and session we actually foresee to jointly organize the next 1.5 hours, a bit less. And indeed, Peter is very sorry, also the chair of the CIB working group, to not be able to join and actively engage in moderating the session due to some unforeseen, very recent circumstances. We've been discussing even last evening, I think, about this session, because for CIB it's really a crucial one to really discuss and consult the constituency. So all geared towards the policy paper we're developing together with IDS, the Institute of Development Studies. We're also here with us today. Yeah, I think we shouldn't waste too much time. We have indeed a few contributors who are willing to share some thoughts on the topic at hand. I think in the concept note, which can also be found at UCLGMeets, and also with the draft policy statement and other documents, there are some guiding questions formulated. And we're just trying to see if we can collect some answers on that, to collect some viewpoints, which will be of great value to CIB, to IDS, to further work and on the policy paper itself. And I would like to start by inviting the head of Foreign Relations and Tourism of Izmir, Gökçe Baskaya, to maybe share some first thoughts on the topic. So please take the floor if you would feel comfortable.
Thank you. I'm glad to address you at this very important event. We have huge economic, social, environmental, agricultural concerns and injustice in our world. According to these realities, we must focus on establishing more integrated and efficient policies to make our cities more developed and resilient in the face of global and local challenges. The local and regional authorities play a very important role in achieving developed future and acceleration of implementation of the Agenda 2030. Many cities of the world are increasingly applying the SDGs framework. Also, Izmir Metropolitan Municipality prepared its strategic plan within the framework of Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. Development cooperation is a relatively new concept in international relations, having risen in importance in the 1950s. Also, it's generally understood to serve the purpose of assisting countries in their efforts to make social and economic progress. In today's world, foreign aid to true international development cooperation remains a very important source of development finance. Certainly, foreign aid is a very important source for many countries of the world. As you know, the Decade of Action has 3 pillars: global action, local action, and people action. The decade shows that globalization and decentralization is our new reality. In this century, international donors should actually be providing much more concessional loans so that countries fund their own development projects aligned with local and regional priorities. Even though the COVID-19 pandemic has seriously restricted the traditional city cooperation methods, municipalities never stop looking for new cooperation opportunities. Also, Izmir Metropolitan Municipality has managed one of the most successful responses to COVID-19 pandemic in Turkey. We really need to recognize the importance of cities into global development agendas. Today, decentralized cooperation continues as an evolving concept located at the intersection of these 2 parent fields: development cooperation and international municipal relations. However, it should be also about sharing good experiences and strengthening capacities. We need more connection between our cities to overcome today's very complex crisis through collective action. In this context, using city diplomacy tools will be dominant strategy for Izmir Metropolitan Municipality's further policies. And if we can connect cooperation strategies of national governments with cities' foreign relations activities, it will be a very important combination to establish proper policy strategies for local governments and cities as well. So I believe that outcomes of this event will lead to even stronger policy strategies in the aspect of cooperation and development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for this great start of the session. I think a lot of points you touched on are so familiar to us. I'm also thinking of course, the UCLG Pact for the Future, for example, to really involve cities, involve municipalities, also the coming time. And I think that's also what we really have in mind with this policy paper. Also to really be used for further advocacy, to learn from each other, to share practices. I think all the points you touched on are really crucial. So thank you for that, and for being willing to share thoughts from Turkey. I think also the reference to the 2030 agenda also really key. I think in the exploration we've been going on with IDS already for quite some time. I would like to go, if that's possible, to the Deputy Director of Xi'an Municipal Foreign Affairs Office, Mrs. Li Xiaoyan. I think she is ready to engage in this discussion. Please, Ms. Li Xiaoyan, if you would like to take the floor, it is all yours. And otherwise, we go to one of the other country leaders.
如果不是的话，我们 将会把这个机会要交给其他。
I'm sorry, I had to switch on the interpretation, but I think you could start indeed. We could hear you, I think. And otherwise, I think we can maybe just go to one of the other contributors, and then we reconnect with you in about a few minutes, if that's okay. So then I think we can maybe now go to André Viola, Counselor for Europe and International Affairs at the Odd County Council and Counselor of the Opportunities for All Policy Council. André, please take the floor. I am hearing some background noises, but André, if you're with us, it would be our pleasure if you could take the floor. And we have many other contributors, so otherwise we'll just throw one of the others and come back to you as well. But André, please, if you can hear us, you're very welcome.
I think we need to warm up a bit, Stan. Just give the floor to the next speaker. But they are all here, so we should be okay. Go ahead.
I think we can go to our dear friend Dara from Cambodia. So Pok Sokandara, Secretary General of the Association of Subnational Administration Councils in Cambodia. Dear Dara, please take the floor if you're comfortable.
For the case of Cambodia, now we are implementing some project relating to local economic development, which is funded by the government of Canada through the Federation of Canadian Equality. It is the 6-year project. It started in 2016 and supposed to be ended in November last year, but because of COVID, that it extended for another year to December this year. And this project focused on promoting the role of local government in Cambodia to building their capacity to facilitate local economic growth. And during this COVID pandemic, this project is also support local government to have to prevent the COVID spread in their community also. And now we are working for another project, which is promoting women in local government. Is another 6-year project starting from this year until 2027. And this project will help to build the capacity of local government in Cambodia. And so we have 2 projects is running, which is supported by the government of Canada through the Federation of Canadian Government. In addition to this project, we are having another project funded by European Union through IMF, Association International de la Francophonie. And this project also promote the best practice of local government in urban planning and informal settlement. It another 3-year project which will be ended by the end of 2021. So thank you. This is the project that are running with in form of international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dara. Tuning in, I think it's a bit later already in Cambodia, so thanks a lot for taking the time. And also referring indeed to the interesting program you're implementing, I think, together with the Canadian FCM. Very interesting. I just reached the message that Mercedes would be really happy to share some thoughts as well. Of course, Mercedes Sanchez, I think, well familiar to many of you, the Deputy Director of Corporation of the Spanish Federation of Municipalities and Provinces, FEMP. So Mercedes, please, if you'd like to share your thoughts, you're very welcome.
Buenas tardes y buenos días a todos y a todas, y gracias por la invitación a la Secretaría General, a Stan, y bueno, por compartir hoy en día bueno, algunas reflexiones, ¿no? En primer lugar, también quiero felicitar, ¿no?, al Grupo de Fortalecimiento Institucional y de Capacidades por este primer documento de posicionamiento político con la que desde la Federación Española de Municipios y Provincias estamos, bueno, totalmente de acuerdo, ¿no? Es un primer pistoletazo de salida con consideraciones muy importantes que, como decía la Secretaría General al principio, nos van a permitir durante todo este buró, más las siguientes reuniones en los consejos políticos, abordar no la cooperación descentralizada, en nuestro caso local, pero también regional, como una verdadera política, me van a permitir, ¿no?, decimos que una verdadera política de Estado, una verdadera política regional a nivel de Europa en nuestro caso, y también como una verdadera política de Estado a nivel de Naciones Unidas, ¿no? Está claro que la cooperación de los gobiernos locales en las últimas décadas ha evolucionado considerablemente, formando parte, como decía, ¿no?, de la mayoría en los mayores países de los sistemas de cooperación internacional, ¿no? Yo creo que se ha demostrado que el papel de los gobiernos locales, de la cooperación descentralizada, se ha convertido en piezas claves, ¿no? Somos actores claves para abordar los desafíos de un desarrollo sostenible, y estos desafíos también estamos abordándolos tanto desde CGLU, ¿no?, con este posicionamiento, como a nivel europeo y también a nivel español, teniendo como línea de base de los futuros planes de cooperación local tanto los principios de la Agenda 2030 como de la nueva Agenda Urbana, así como lo recogido en el marco de Sendai para la resiliencia, ¿no? Creemos que es una oportunidad también de abordar la localización de la Agenda 2030, de la Agenda Urbana, pero también del marco de Sendai de la resiliencia, algo que estamos impulsando, ¿no?, desde CGLU, y desde la FEN lo agradecemos. Actualmente, y no quiero tomar mucho tiempo, compartir que nosotros a nivel España estamos abordando ahora mismo un momento bastante apasionante, que es, tras 20 años de legislación y arquitectura de la cooperación española, el nuevo sistema de cooperación, ¿no? En esta situación estamos desde la FEM participando en los debates en el seno del Congreso de los Diputados, en el Senado, para colocar a los gobiernos locales como verdaderos actores, y que esta nueva legislación que se apruebe y la nueva arquitectura recoja todo por lo que también desde CGLU se ha venido trabajando en los últimos años, ¿no?, que es colocarnos como verdaderos actores de esta política internacional. Señalar que también estamos, y creemos que es importante, que en esta década de acción que nos queda y que estamos impulsando, colocar a la cooperación internacional para el desarrollo y solidaridad como política palanca, ¿no?, como una política palanca imprescindible para alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, ¿no? Creemos también que, y voy terminando, cuestiones que estábamos hablando, ¿no?, otro tipo de cooperación, donde tendríamos que afianzar. Creo que el impulso a las alianzas público-privadas y multiactor desde la cooperación descentralizada local es importante, ¿no? en esta nueva etapa. Apostar por la participación ciudadana, la co-creación en los planes locales de desarrollo de solidaridad por parte de los gobiernos locales, así como impulsar los planes de educación para la ciudadanía global, ¿no? Finalmente, y para concluir, una pequeña relación, además últimamente estamos viviendo todos los procesos y las dificultades de los flujos migratorios, ¿no? Aunque no quiero abrir un melón, porque sí que está muy claro y nosotros lo tenemos muy claro, que la política de cooperación internacional, la política de cooperación, el desarrollo es totalmente distinta a la política migratoria, sí que creemos que desde la cooperación internacional es poner en valor que las acciones de la cooperación cooperación al desarrollo lo que hacen es acortar las desigualdades en el territorio, las desigualdades sociales, las desigualdades de género, etcétera. Por eso hay que apostar por la política de cooperación, porque eso nos permitirá seguramente disminuir flujos migratorios que tienen que ver con la salida de personas en sus territorios porque no están en las condiciones óptimas de desarrollo. Así que bueno, lo dejo ahí. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad y felicitaros por el trabajo hecho y seguiremos en el camino juntos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. And I think before we can go to try connect with Xian, I would just like to ask you one additional question, if that's okay with you, Mercedes. I think you touched on quite a few real recent developments, and of course, this paper it will be relevant for many years that have to come. The previous one, the previously developed policy. Okay, I think. Yes, please. I think we can connect with Xian now. Please take the floor. You're very welcome.
好的，各位同事、秘书长，大家好。大家应该看到我们现在这个背景啊，和以前的会议呢有一点不同。我们换了一个办公条件，换了一个办公室。今天呢，我们是在新的办公室里跟大家在交流。很高兴呢能够参加这次会议呢，在这里谈谈我们的一些想法和看法。2020年到2030年呢是落实联合国可持续发展目标的黄金的10年。我们在世界成立组织的多边合作平台的框架下呢，来共同探讨在地方政府层面呢加强合作和交流，促进共同发展呢非常具有重大的意义。就像大家都说的，现在呢疫情给我们带来了非常大的困难和挑战。正是在这样的情况之下呢，我们更要加强紧密的合作伙伴关系，来促进我们全球化的进程。我借这个会呢来谈3点想法。第一呢，我们要增强合作意识，更进一步的增强我们的积极合作。正如后疫情时代宣言里所强调的，团结是地方和区域政府之间安全与合作的灯塔，是实现全球目标的重要手段。在全球疫情背景下，城市封闭、冲突和矛盾加剧，合作应对挑战呢，是国际社会的唯一的选择。我们地方政府呢，要在世界成立组织等倡导多边合作交流的国际组织平台上呢，更加积极的开展合作，在工商共建的基础上呢，实现一个合作共赢。第2点意见呢，我们要聚焦行动，以行动呢来解决疫情背景下的新的问题。全球的疫情背景呢，是给地方政府都带来了巨大的考验。地方政府呢，作为直接服务人民的群体呢，面临着更加艰巨的消除贫困、打造韧性、增强抵抗风险能力的任务。包括呢，我们要提供公共服务，保障粮食安全，应对气候灾害，打造强大的卫生系统，解决不平等等问题。发展合作和地方政府的这个政策文件的制定呢，总结了地方和区域政府面对的新挑战，十分 对地方和区域政府为未来10年的发展合作呢，提供帮助，让我们更进一步的为未来的解决困难做好充分的准备。这样呢，非常有利于解决城市面临的问题，来推动2030可持续发展目标的实现，来实现我们城市的共同发展。第3个意见呢，我们建议我们更进一步的加强发展成果的分享，加快地方经验呢在全球的推广。联合国可持续发展目标的60%都是要在地方政府层面来实现的。在世界城际组织的框架下呢，我们打造了地方行动港这样一个模式。这个项目的设立呢，非常有助于进一步的来协调联动我们的国际合作伙伴，来推动联合国可持续发展目标的国际议程的加速落实。通过地方行动港这样的一些项目的实施，能够有效的将地方的经验呢在全球推广，促进不同的城市之间的相互的合作和交流。也非常感谢艾米莉亚塞兹秘书长对这个项目的支持，让我们西安呢能够荣幸的参与到其中，能够在教育和文化方面呢跟大家一起来分享我们的经验。各位同事，各位朋友，现在我们目前的世界呢，主题仍然是和平和发展。在当前这样一个倍感艰难的时刻呢，非常需要我们每个城市都以团结、合作、聚焦行动、智慧和勇气来扛起我们的历史责任。相信我们的合作交流一定会更加的深入，也能够取到更加务实的、更加有效的成效。谢谢大家。
Yes, dear Ms. Lee Xiaoyan, thank you very much also for trying to connect with us. Your words are, I think, inspiring and supportive, I would say, that this is indeed a policy paper which is really of use for further advocating to involve cities, to involve municipalities, to seek cooperation, and try to help each other as well. And also pointing out, I think, many of the topics which are challenging. Talking about housing capacity, I think you mentioned a few very valuable points, and we're happy to take note of all these suggestions provided. The Secretariat of CIB is noting them very well, and together with I also see Jaideep, great colleagues of IDS, the Institute of Development Studies, linked to the University of Sussex, and we'll definitely include those. So thank you very much. It's great to see that we have over 120 people already joined now in this session, which is, I think, in a great amount of colleagues. Even saw Barry, I think, commenting in the chat, tuning in from Canada, where it's still very, very early, I think 6:30 in the morning. So it's great to be here all together to discuss this really important topic. And I think especially in times like these, as we're kind of recovering slowly from the pandemic, and maybe just to finish that question that I was about to ask to Mercedes. Mercedes, I was just trying to explain that this will indeed be the second paper, or I think maybe there has one before the previous one of 2013, but this is the follow-up of that paper. So it will be relevant and remain relevant for quite a few years to come. But I was thinking the recent developments, the current reality of COVID-19, is there something you could share, Mercedes, on how that has affected the reality of development cooperation? Is there something you could, from your experience, share on that? And I hope you don't mind me asking, Mercedes.
No te preocupes. Además, creo que es relevante. Espero que se escuche bien, porque me decían que antes había problemas. Espero que ahora se me escuche mejor. Yo creo que es una pregunta, Stan, muy pertinente, porque nosotros lo que hemos estado viendo en el último año es que a pesar de las dificultades que han pasado, ¿no?, los gobiernos locales, los alcaldes, las alcaldesas en la gestión diaria, estamos desde la FEM hemos estado recogiendo información de datos cuantitativos sobre cuáles los presupuestos que han destinado en el ejercicio 2020 y los que van a destinar en el ejercicio 2021, y nos hemos sorprendido gratamente con que no ha habido una disminución. Es decir, los compromisos que han estado de los gobiernos locales para la cooperación internacional en un momento de crisis como fue el año 2020, crisis también a nivel territorial y aquí en España para ellos mismos, se ha mantenido. Por tanto, creo que eso ha sido importante. Dos, creo que otra cuestión que nos hemos dado cuenta es de la necesidad de cooperar. Es decir, yo creo que muchos ayuntamientos, muchos responsables políticos han visto que efectivamente desde la cooperación internacional, que desde lo local, que no solamente y no siempre es solo económica, sino que principalmente nos define lo que es el intercambio de buenas prácticas, el intercambio de experiencias, creo que esto se ha puesto de manifiesto y tengo la sensación de que sí que ha habido una aproximación mayor a entender que la cooperación que se hace desde ayuntamientos, no para los que lo vienen haciendo desde hace décadas, digo un poco para nuevos, ¿no?, para nuevos convencidos de la cooperación internacional, ha sido una oportunidad dentro de la catástrofe que ha sido para demostrar que es necesaria y que es útil. Y yo creo que ha sido un espejo también los encuentros que hemos tenido, ¿no?, y no porque esté en CGLU, sino porque es verdad que durante todos los eventos que el año pasado se han estado haciendo, en el que gracias a ser telemático muchos socios nuestros han podido formar parte de estos intercambios, se ha visto la importancia de la cooperación local al desarrollo, ¿no? Por tanto, no sé si esto responde a tu pregunta, pero creo que en nuestro caso se ha confirmado el compromiso de los gobiernos locales españoles con la cooperación internacional por las dos vías. Por la parte del mantenimiento de los presupuestos en un momento muy delicado y por la detención, de alguna manera, de que el intercambio de experiencias horizontal y que no solamente es lo del sur, ayudamos a los del norte, esta frase horrorosa de hace décadas, sino que todos aprendemos. Y yo creo que ese es uno de los triunfos dentro de el desastre que hemos vivido. Espero que haya podido responder o contribuido a alguna de tus preguntas, Stan.
Yes, it sure does, Mercedes. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And I think we can maybe give the floor to one other contributor, and afterwards we can try to indeed open up the floor a bit for some more interactive discussion. And I see also Lucy Slack in our midst, Acting Secretary General of CLGF, the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. Lucy, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Stan, and thanks very much, colleagues. It's really good to be able to join you today, and I'd really like to thank the previous contributors for some really interesting kind of perspectives. And I think one of the things that, gathering people together globally as we are today, it's very interesting to see the sort of different contexts that everybody is coming from. And I think this is one area which is quite hard to pull too many really direct kind of global trends. I think there are differences in different places. And I think it's a little bit of a cycle in terms of where countries sit on the continuum in terms of their support for development assistance and support for local government and decentralized cooperation and all of the issues that we're talking about today, which is why it's always so fascinating when you get a group of people all focusing on a shared vision. I do think one very important thing which has happened, which I think it's important that we kind of like draw things back to, is the Agenda 2030 and the commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and the recognition in the Sustainable Development Goals of the importance of local government and localization of those goals. Although I would say that I'm not sure how far we're already seeing that coming out in terms of the way in which a lot of the development partners are looking to support local government, particularly some of the bigger sort of international organizations. But I would say, thinking now at a very kind of broad scale, just in terms of one of the sort of guiding questions that we were given in terms of how has the relationship with the donors evolved over the last decade, I would definitely say that it is definitely an evolving relationship, but I think it's evolving in a positive way. I think we're starting to see much more with some of the sort of bilateral organizations, very strong partnerships between the international development arm of government and local government. I mean, Canada's in our midst. We know about the strong relationship that exists there. We've seen that relationship going from a very challenging one in New Zealand, coming back to a much more positive and much more cooperative arrangement. And I think from our perspective as global organizations and as local government organizations engaging with the European Union, I would definitely say that there is a much stronger will to partner with local government. Where I think we still find challenges is in how we translate that partnership into action and change on the ground. And that's what I want to kind of come on to say a little bit about in the final bits and pieces that I want to mention. I do think the current crisis has had a big impact on development assistance. Just hearing from you in terms of your experience, in terms of your own projects and programs, I think it will require quite a major rethink away from some of the more traditional kind of north-south engagement that we have seen in the past. And I think that local government working as a global entity is in a very good position to be able to move into this space and play a very strong, both a convening role, but also a provision of expertise role. And particularly, I think, to really bolster and strengthen what we can do in terms of South-South cooperation, because I think that's very much something which our movement is well positioned to be able to address. So I think taking that kind of global discussion around development assistance and what that looks like, and thinking about where we position local government and the strengths that local government can bring to the table. But I do also see some major challenges. I mean, I'm speaking to you from the UK. Obviously, FCDO is in the middle of some very major reforms and cuts. I'm sure Jaydeep will have something to say about this when he comes in a second. And I think, you know, we will see that impact directly on the kinds of work that we're engaged in. But equally, I think the COVID pandemic has put the focus on local. And I think because we have, as a global movement, been keeping local government very much in the sort of public eye, I think we are very well positioned to be able to sort of come back and make a much stronger case, another case, a different case, if you like, for the importance of local, for the importance of territorial development, and the things that we as a group of organizations are keen to see. So I see both negatives and positives coming from that. And I think, you know, we've seen organizations being able to continue their solidarity, to continue their partnership, to really strengthen their partnership during this time of crisis. And I think that's something incredibly positive and something which we definitely need to build on. But I still feel that we we struggle as local government with the kind of sectoral approach of many of the big development organizations. And in many cases, their lack of commitment to wanting to work at the city level as well. You know, it's been a bit of a slow process to get some of the development organizations to think about urban, to think about cities, and to think about investing in cities. So I think we really need, as a group of organizations, to continue to sort of really push very strongly on this agenda, because I think, you know, in terms of meeting the needs of citizens and really being able to reach out to where local government's needs are really urgently required, I think that is something which we definitely need to be giving more attention to, and finding really strategic ways in which we can link local government's agenda with some of the more sectoral agendas of some of those development partners. in order to see some of those resources actually coming into local government. Because I think, you know, we talk a lot about supporting local government, but that's often through programs which actually support central government and sometimes have a trickle-down effect to local government. And I think we still need to be very clear, and this is something which we're pushing, you know, with the European Union and with other development partners, that we want to see some of these resources to come directly into supporting local government and the kind of partnerships that we want to develop between you know, local governments in different parts of the world. And then finally, and this is my kind of maybe something, because I haven't read the full document, for which I apologize, but the other thing that I would like to see in here in terms of a priority, and something which I think is we're increasingly seeing as a priority in terms of the wider kind of development sector, is actually gender. And I think this is an area that local government can really play a very strong role. And I think that, you know, it's possibly one of the routes into some of that clever negotiation around ensuring that local government has its kind of, you know, its direct engagement on some of this work. So that's something which I would definitely like to see kind of flagged in here more strategically. And then, I mean, just finally to kind of to close out, and from the presentations that other colleagues have also made, is I think it really does emphasize the importance of meetings like this, of engagement like this, of advocacy like the advocacy that we're talking about here, because I really feel that we haven't been able to successfully make the whole case yet. So it is still very much a work in progress. So it's great to see so many people on this call. And I think if we can get a kind of, if you like, a rallying cry, a document, something that we can then use to kind of really take a positive message to development partners, I think that that will really help to kind of like build and perhaps a little bit change that relationship between local government and development partners in order to kind of step in and capitalize on some of those points that I was making earlier. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Lucy, for this very these powerful insights. Really, I think indeed topics like gender, SDG number 5, it is increasingly important, and I think also UCLG has put quite some effort also with different events, live learning experiences, for example, really focused on the topic. Also, really one of the key priorities for quite a few years, but now even more than ever for the CIB Secretariat, will definitely have quite a bit of focus in the paper as well. I think also trends like South-South cooperation, there's great potential, but also things we need to learn, and we could better capitalize, I think, those possibilities that lie there as well. Yeah, I think just maybe I heard quite a few really good things also from the other contributors. I think it's very insightful already. I was just thinking maybe, Emilia, as of course you're on a daily basis in contact with so many colleagues in our network, is there something maybe you could briefly reflect on based on the first few contributions, or is there maybe something you would like to ask to one of the contributors?
Thank you very much, Stan. I think we need to open the floor, and before doing that, I want to. I think it would be interesting indeed to maybe organize thoughts around the discussion. I think there is a very big job that we still need to do to foster a cooperation among cities, and that's a role that networks like UCLG and CLGF need to play to make sure that we still convince our members that this international action and cooperation is important and relevant. And I think that tools like the one that we have developed around development cooperation and localization, a learning module, which is based on the patrimony, on our legacy as a movement, are very relevant to that end. So that is one role that we need to play, and it is that part also that can feed into the positive stories and proposals that that Lucy, the Secretary General of CLGF, was referring to. I very much agree with that. Then there is another part of our work that is still around development cooperation. that we need to convince about the transformative role that this kind of cooperation can have, and the differentiated space that it should occupy in the international sphere right now. And we will be hearing a little bit more about it from our Ubuntu advisor, Barbara Samuels, on how she looks at that from the finance perspective. We will also have a colleague from the Institute for Development Studies commenting on that. But before we go there, I think it is important to make sure that we are covering everything we want to cover. This policy paper indeed is very oriented towards our interlocution with other stakeholders, and I think this is very important to take into account. So it's a guide for us on our vision on cooperation for the future, but it's very geared towards talking to other constituencies, to other groups. And I think we can also make sure, like Lucy was saying, that we rally other networks behind these ideas. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have clear messages there. And if anything, I think the work that we have done is wonderful. But I can also see that since we have not advanced a lot in our positioning over the past 11 years, not as much as we wanted, then we keep repeating some of the messages that we had a couple of years ago. I am wondering now, while opening the floor, whether there are other areas that we need to focus on, whether there are concrete things that we have learned during the pandemic that should be inserted in this policy paper. And that's how I would like to open the floor, Stan. I think we have around 15 minutes for that open floor, and then we could go to Barbara and Jadip Gupta that are already with us. And then I propose to have closing remarks from a member of the presidency, the mayor of Kitchener, Barry Brabanovich. But what about 15 minutes of inputs? And I see that many colleagues from Cités Unis France are with us, so please feel free to ask for the floor. I see also FAMSI is with us, an important fund for local governments in southern Spain. There are so many colleagues that are with us. Many secretaries generals are with us. From sections, Africa, MEWA, etc. So I am looking at, I also see Mercociudades is really early for them, but they are also here. So I'm looking at the list, and if I see your hands, then I would be very happy to give you the floor. And if I don't see any hands, I might find volunteers. So I don't know, but I also see that Elena is with us from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and she has been very involved in the work of the CIB. Elena, do you want to break the ice? You woke up really early for us. Do please.
Thank you, Amelia. It's great to be here, and yes, it is very early, and I'm very happy to see the Mayor of Kitchener join. This paper is really important for FCM, for CIB, for VNG, and many others on this call today. And we really wanted to make sure that we were refreshing the paper. It has been 8 years, and as Amelia said, many of the arguments are still the same. The paper didn't reflect the SDGs, didn't reflect any of the UN adopted frameworks over the last couple of years. But then pandemic also affected it. I know in Canada, we're seeing, local governments having to be at the forefront every day. We're seeing that around the world. We're also seeing the issues of internationally around re-centralization. We've been advocating towards decentralization through this paper and through the aid effectiveness paper of 2008. And we have to make sure that we're not going back to those systems. There has been, there's obviously some need to re-centralize some things because of the pandemic, but we have to ensure that that does not become the norm, and that local governments continue to have the ability to to engage in these topics, to engage with their citizens. I think I'll leave it there, only because I don't have a lot more to say. I think any inputs that anyone can give in terms of those items are really interesting for us. But I would say probably my biggest concern is how we ensure that decentralization continues to be a priority and that we don't end up with nationalized agendas. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Elena. I share with you when we were thinking about this policy paper, we were thinking, okay, it has been a very long time and many things have changed. Maybe not what we are asking to the international community. It might not have changed drastically, but the context has changed. The way that we have learned to do cooperation is different. And I hope this policy paper also can contribute from that perspective. Let me, I see that volunteers are coming up through the chat. So I'm going to go to Manuel Redaño from FAMSI, and then I would go to Jorge Rodríguez from Mercociudades. And I don't know, Stan, if we have Cholile George with us already from Salga. Is he here?
Yes, I'm here, Emilia. And good morning, good evening, good day.
Cholile, give us a second. We will give you the floor after the next two speakers. Are you okay with that?
No, that's okay. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So let us start with Manuel. Manuel, a ti la palabra. La perspectiva desde FAMSI. ¿Cómo estamos viendo cambiar la discusión con la comunidad internacional, pero también con los gobiernos nacionales con los que vosotros trabajáis?
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Emilia, y felicitar como siempre por el buen trabajo que CGLU desarrolla y que nos hace sentir muy cómodos y en familia, ¿no? Como solemos decir. Bueno, nosotros creemos que, como tú has mencionado, ha evolucionado el papel de los gobiernos locales en la agenda global y ha evolucionado además en una situación muy compleja que el COVID nos ha hecho enfrentar, y además quiero reconocer desde aquí que el gran papel que nuestros gobiernos locales, al menos los que tenemos en nuestro entorno, han realizado en la prestación de servicios públicos básicos en este tiempo de pandemia, y que ha permitido que la población pueda sobrevivir o sobrellevar esta situación con unas garantías de atención en servicios básicos como digo, de mucha calidad. Por lo tanto, creo que es un escenario diferente, como decías, que tenemos que atender, que tenemos que mirar. Seguramente va a afectar no es solo al terminar la situación de pandemias ligada a la salud, sino que luego tendremos que también afrontar otro tipo de retos ligados más al desarrollo de la economía, de los empleos, de la riqueza de la población, y por lo tanto la importancia de los gobiernos locales va a estar, creo que en primera línea, para afrontar todo este tipo de retos. Aprovecho en esa segunda etapa y traslado una invitación a todo el grupo de participantes para la semana próxima, que como bien sabéis organizamos el Foro Mundial de Desarrollo Económico en Córdoba, y que creo que puede ser también un buen momento para debatir ese espacio del mundo local en cuanto a los retos futuros que tenemos. Reitero mi felicitación y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Efectivamente, Manuel, muy importante transmitir los cambios que estamos viendo y el papel de frontliners, como les llamamos, ¿no? Ahí en primera línea de los gobiernos locales. Yo reivindico mucho, y yo creo que en el Buró Ejecutivo se va a notar esto también, porque nuestro liderazgo está muy convencido de que tenemos que también dar un papel diferente al servicio público local en la discusión de la cooperación al desarrollo. Muy importante es esta reflexión, efectivamente, y aquí Emilio, que es muy rápido, ya ha puesto el link en el chat para el foro LED, en donde vamos a estar participando activamente. Pues ahora nos vamos con Jorge y después con Cholile. Jorge de Mercociudades, a ti la palabra. Montevideo, Mercociudades debería decir. No sé en qué capacidad quieres hablar, Jorge.
Bueno, buenos días, gracias Emilia. Aquí desde el sur, desde muy tempranito estamos participando. Muchas gracias, felicitaciones por la jornada y por el desafío que siempre es el armado de estos espacios. Yo creo que hay una mirada muy interesante de lo que estamos haciendo, debatiendo sobre la cooperación en este contexto, ¿no? Yo creo que hay 2 o 3 elementos que debemos recuperar y en Mercociudades estamos trabajando para ello, en el sentido de que la cooperación hoy nos muestra la urgente necesidad de la articulación multinivel de la acción. Es difícil o tenemos muchos ejemplos en este contexto de pandemia que el no hacerlo, las dificultades que se crean o las no respuestas que se dan, ¿sí? Esta articulación entre los distintos niveles de gobierno, esta gobernanza, esta articulación con el gobierno nacional, regional, es esencial de incluir en el tema de la cooperación. Y otro elemento muy importante en ese espacio es la articulación entre iguales, entre gobiernos locales, ¿sí? La cooperación sur-sur hoy se torna un elemento de autonomía de los gobiernos locales, pero de sustancial importancia para conocer otras experiencias, para conocer otras soluciones. Entonces, la pandemia o la salida de la pandemia nos ha mostrado cosas que ya sabíamos, pero que nos ha puesto como muy relevantes en la agenda. Y algunos otros temas que son muy importantes de incorporar en esta cooperación están en nuestros documentos hoy. ¿No? La cooperación no es un fin en sí mismo, sino que efectivamente hay que mejorarla, reforzarla, desarrollarla y a su vez darle músculo a los gobiernos locales para el desarrollo de esa cooperación. Desde Mercociudades tenemos la propuesta de un programa de cooperación sur-sur en este sentido, y la verdad que la experiencia que nos va dejando es la necesidad justamente de una articulación con muchos. Esa es la verdad que queríamos compartir con ustedes.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. Yo creo muy relevante y veo también que Mercedes y Elena están compartiendo cosas en el chat y mi propio equipo me recuerda que, además, que los Local for Action Hubs, además del que ha mencionado FAMSI, que tienen efectivamente sobre public services, sobre servicio público, estamos haciendo, y ya deben de tener en sus bandejas de entrada, estamos haciendo un llamado especial para los países, para los miembros con países con menos ingresos, para que desde ahí también se puedan desarrollar Local for Action Hubs y visibilizar el trabajo. Y creemos que sería muy interesante que muchos de ustedes que trabajan en esos países piensen con sus contrapartes allí cómo podrían contribuir a esto, porque creemos que es una forma muy fácil de darle visibilidad. Tenemos un equipo que está trabajando en eso, sabéis que estamos haciendo conexiones entre las diferentes áreas de trabajo. And what I would say is very interesting is that through the Local for Action Hubs, we want to help initiatives that are being developed by the members for the members, but we also want to give them a special visibility internationally, for instance, in the high-level political forum. So think about it. I see that the city of Barcelona and Jordi is also with us. Think a bit about it, whether this is something that you could also contribute to. So I've got Cholile, the Secretary General, the CEO of SALGA, the South African Local Government Association, to reflect on some of these ideas, Cholile, and then I will take two more people, and we would go towards the closing for the next half hour. So Cholile, are you ready? I cannot hear you, my friend. Are you still there? Now I am hearing. Yes, here, there he is.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank
you, Emilia. And good morning, good day, and good evening to everyone who is present on this platform. It's a great honor and opportunity for SALGA to share on some of the issues that occupy us on development cooperation and local government. Firstly, I agree, Program Director, with many inputs that previous speakers have raised, particularly on the area of the need for us to have a much more focused commitment on the area of development cooperation. But more importantly, Program Director, I think there's a need for us to consolidate a more coherent effort towards the focus on transformation of the living conditions of the people, especially those affected by poverty, marginalization, and discrimination, because it's a picture that is common to us as a developing country. But one of the areas that I also agree is that when it comes to the issues of responding comprehensively on donor implementation and mobilization, our own experience is that over the last decade is that aid has been very much insufficient, and sometimes it comes across as misdirected. We have seen that in many areas in our country where there's not been better coordination of these areas. So we think that going forward, there's a need for us to improve on this area. And to give you a particular example for us as South Africa, we are a fairly new democracy in the context of Africa. In fact, we are almost like the last country to taste political freedom just in the last 27 years. So consistent with that, we received quite a lot of support in terms of the areas around grounding the democratic project of our country, providing projects around stability, and so on. But as we went further, after the last 15 years, we saw donor committees shifting to other countries, almost characterizing us that we are almost a much more solid democracy, so to speak. Yet on the issues of poverty, we are still facing huge challenges of inequality and deprivation. So as SALGA, one of the key issues that we have learned is that as an organization, when we have access to multiple donors, before we could get away in terms of reporting and so on. But now we have decided to go back to basics because accountability is much more tightened. And I think many countries have experienced the same. We are now communicating more on the positive impact of the support we are receiving, targeting our municipalities, and also developing a reputation for delivering on the expectations. Many of the funds we have received, we have successfully executed those. That help us grow more reputation. And I think many sister associations elsewhere in the world, if they focus on execution, they will grow their own reputation around that. We have also looked at the area of ensuring that we show value for money in terms of accountability with the limited resources we have, and also improve visibility of donor support. We're using all our platforms to show this. And on the question of some of the characteristics on the current development cooperation, again, we agree with this. And from us over the last 15 to 20 years, the focus has been more on advancing democracy and decentralization at municipal level. We are one of those countries where there's a fairly elaborate articulation of our constitutional order, and local government is accorded a status in our constitution as a fully fledged sphere with its own direct powers, direct resources, and so on. So we are using those resources to ground implementation of some of these areas. And the focus also, as you said, Program Director, is on women, youth, and disabled. That's our shift now in terms of women empowerment, youth empowerment, consistent with the SDGs. Where we still had difficulties has been more around attracting resources to respond on COVID-19, especially frontline support like PPEs, as well as sanitizers. So the focus is predominantly on the economic recovery for our country. Lastly, the two issues that maybe we need to improve on, all of us, on the obstacles, is that we need to collapse the silo mentality approach that sometimes donors tend to come. So maybe at a UCLG level, we could use that as a central coordinating point for all of us as regions to make sure that at least we remove the risk of duplication. Secondly, the issues of transformation around development cooperation, the sources of funding to be much more clearer, articulated in our own vision as local authorities. So we need to inform much more better some of the issues we want to localize, SDGs and other goals. Skills transfer is also very important, that for us, we need to build capacity of our own countries. The final component of my last input is on the issue of the experience we've seen as a country, especially now that some of them are more warming up to allow us to redirect funding to make sure that we can use it in the fight against COVID-19. Some of them, for instance, in the UN support we have received as SALGA, we're able to secure PPEs, we're able to provide frontline protective equipment to many municipal workers. And we think that going forward, it will help us to improve on some of the limitations that many of us are experiencing. On that note, thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for these inputs. I think it is very relevant, the link that you have made also with the legal status. Many things change when your status changes, and I think it is a very important point that we will also need to include somehow in our policy paper, how important it is to recognize the role of local governments and the status of a local government there. There are also very good inputs in the chat about making sure that we include in our policy paper references to the role of local governments in recovery. I think it's part of the broader reivindication that we are making through the strategy of the Pact for the Future. It is our colleague from ALAS, Paola Arjona, who's making very interesting comments on that. Paola, if we have a moment, I would like to give you the floor. I am going now to Boris Stonhauser from Platforma, who is looking at things of course, from a network perspective. And I would like to go later and to ask our colleague Bishir Odemi from our office in Lebanon to get ready to intervene so that we can have inputs from a different perspective as well. If nobody else asks for the floor, then I would then move to the last segment of the session. But if someone else would like to take the floor, please do let me know. So let us go with Boris. Boris, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and congratulations to you and the whole team for the organization of this very rich discussion, which really gives us lots of insights about where we go in the future, where we stand in decentralized cooperation and where we should go in the years to come. That's why we also welcome very much the drafting of the paper by UCLG, where we also contributed with our input on cooperation with CIB, obviously. Maybe just a very few short comments on behalf of our, let's say, European network. We had listened a lot about the need for coordination, about the need for synergies, for working better together, for better impact, for better outcomes on the ground. So we, as a network of over 30 European actors, local governments and their associations active in decentralized cooperation, try to walk the talk, to cooperate together, to coordinate together, and to see how our activities fit together, inform each other, so that we don't duplicate our efforts, so that our partners, our actors on the ground have more information about the policy context, about other activities, and about possible synergies. So definitely the future for us is the policy context, the 2030 agenda, and all the international frameworks that have been mentioned, including the Sendai framework. It's really important to be structured in this, in our activities, in our thinking. In terms of our specifically European perspective, we definitely work very closely with the European Union institutions to make sure that the European Union development policy goes in line with our views, what local governments need, and we are always happy to listen to the partner countries so that we understand how to shape a little bit the European Union development policy towards the support of local governments and their associations in partner countries. So I think that the great success was our long lobbying effort in the past 2 or 3 years with the new European Development Cooperation Instrument called NDICI, or very shortly Global Europe. That would be the new name where we try to make sure that a certain amount of financing is allocated for the development of local democracy and local governments in the partner countries. So for the upcoming financial period, we have secured 500 million euros for this objective. So we think it's a great success in terms of our lobbying, but also a great success for all those that will be able to work with this investment, to work with this support from the European Commission through EU delegations on the ground in partner countries. So maybe just a reminder to everyone, this financing will be distributed through European Union delegations, each partner country individually. So it's very important to launch dialogue with EU delegations on the ground to make sure that this support is allocated for local governments and decentralization in the partner countries. We will also work closely with our partners on the dialogue with national governments. We have a specific work cluster that will deal with this issue so that we can make sure that national associations in European countries can lead a fruitful dialogue with the national government to secure financing, but also to secure specific priorities which are in line with the needs of our beneficiaries, of the local governments all around the world. And last but not least, I really would like to highlight our wonderful cooperation with UCLG, not only on the paper on the future decentralized cooperation, which is the policy aspect. We had also working together with UCLG on the resources, on a paper on innovative financing for decentralized cooperation. So this will be another contribution into the puzzle of our future engagement. But also, last but not least, the finalization of the 4th training module on sustainable development goals and decentralized cooperation, which is a great reader on modern decentralized cooperation, and it's really recommended for everybody to read, but also to see with UCLG Learning how we set up in the coming months a training of trainers. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Boris. It pains my heart to stop you when you're talking about our collaboration, but yes, I have to do it because we need to move ahead. You have mentioned indeed the module that I was referring to before. I also see that my team is making reference to other tools that we have, like the 7 Keys program around culture, which is also a very innovative program to foster cooperation. I think it is very relevant to acknowledge the successes that we are having, and it's good, Boris, that you remind us the successful lobby or advocacy that we have been doing before the European Union. That is part of the positive story, Stan, that I feel should also be in the paper that we are preparing. Very quick rounds now to Bishir Odemi and then to Paola, just also because women are contributing a lot in the chat, but we didn't see them in the screen enough. So for the sake of our equality-driven movement, also, Paola, I invite you to share very briefly your thoughts orally. Bishir, bienvenue, à toi la parole.
Gracias, Emilia. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Un placer estar de nuevo con ustedes, así sea a través del medio virtual. Sí, estaba compartiendo, Emilia, pues ante el llamado que hizo CIB, desde ALAS hicimos una reflexión estratégica y compartimos con el CIB algunos pensamientos pues, y algunas reflexiones para contribuir a este discurso, ¿no? Y desde ALAS, aparte de lo que puse ahí, después voy a compartir también el documento que está solamente en español. Consideramos que es importante reposicionar la narrativa o posicionar la narrativa de la cooperación descentralizada, ¿no? Ante la cooperación al desarrollo. Se ha hecho un esfuerzo muy importante y lo mencionaba Jorge Rodríguez también por reivindicar la cooperación sur-sur y triangular, pero en el ADN del trabajo que hacemos todas y todos de los gobiernos locales está la cooperación descentralizada, ¿no? Entonces creo que hay un trabajo importante que hacer y lo está también haciendo CGLU en el día a día y lo hicimos a través del Live Learning Experience, y es esa narrativa, ¿no? ¿Cómo hacemos para construir una nueva narrativa sobre la cooperación descentralizada, pero sobre todo algo que es importante para mostrar la fuerza de este tipo de cooperación y es monitorear y evaluar los impactos de las alianzas y las iniciativas que realizamos, ¿no? Y obviamente pues también esto pasa por nosotros también por dentro de esta cooperación descentralizada involucrar a diferentes actores de desarrollo en las ciudades, ¿no? La pandemia nos demostró que de esto no salimos solo y necesitamos colaborar también, y la cooperación al interior de las ciudades, entonces que es muy importante que en esta cooperación descentralizada también los actores y los sujetos de la cooperación tengan una voz y estén empoderados. Entonces voy a compartir el enlace a los clientes les digo, y también el último cuaderno de la colección de alas que hicimos en el marco de Cordial el año pasado, que analizaba cuál era el impacto y el trabajo que hicimos desde las redes de ciudades y la cooperación internacional para dar respuesta a la crisis del COVID-19.
Muchas gracias, Paola. Esperamos los links que nos vas a compartir para que enriquezcan nuestro trabajo. Y ahora sí, Bishir, te doy a ti la palabra, 2 minutitos.
Oui, c'est pas Michel, c'est Béchir, donc.
No, yo lo he pronunciado bien, Bishir, no sé la traducción.
Je parle de l'interprète, je parle de l'interprète. Je suivais en français, d'accord. Merci, bonjour à tout le monde. Donc, je suis le représentant de CGLE au Liban. Vous êtes peut-être au courant des difficultés de ce pays, donc qu'il traverse à plusieurs niveaux. Ça prouve donc encore une fois ce que vous avez dit, et ça je peux vous l'assurer, quand l'État n'arrive plus à assumer ses fonctions, on a très bien vu au Liban le rôle des municipalités, surtout dans la lutte contre la COVID-19. Ça, tout le monde l'a vu, tous les bailleurs l'ont vu, et je pense que c'est très, très bien. En fait, je voudrais quand même signaler 2 choses. Malgré tous les efforts qu'on a fait, nous, parce qu'on anime le comité des maires libanais, il n'y a pas une association nationale de maires, mais il y a un groupement de maires qui est l'unique groupement dans le pays pour porter sa voix, pour dialoguer avec l'État, pour dialoguer avec les bailleurs. On a toujours un manque au niveau de la délégation de l'Union européenne. Ce dialogue ne se fait pas. On a pu le faire à un moment donné, mais depuis un certain temps, ce dialogue ne se fait pas et les programmes ne se font pas avec ce comité des maires libanais. C'est fâcheux en fait. Je ne sais pas quoi faire. Les maires ne savent plus comment avancer dans ce domaine. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour développer ce dialogue réel? Ça, c'est une chose. Et quand il n'y a pas ce dialogue avec les maires, les projets qui sont développés dans un pays comme le Liban, ils se développent avec le pouvoir central. Donc il y a presque toujours aucune mention du rôle de la collectivité locale dans le développement des choses, dans les projets, dans les financements à venir, etc., etc. Donc, on parle toujours des mêmes choses, aéroports, les routes, les autoroutes, voilà. Bon, il y a un deuxième élément, très rapidement, bien sûr, sans entrer dans les détails, mais ça, c'est fâcheux pour la coopération décentralisée. C'est même dangereux. Donc, on assiste aujourd'hui à une coopération que je ne veux pas citer le nom, c'est pas le moment, mais une coopération avec une collectivité européenne, là où il y a une subvention signée, il y a tout ce qu'il faut, bien sûr, dans les règles et tout. On travaille dans ce domaine depuis 27 ans. Et on arrive aujourd'hui à appliquer les lois de ce pays européen au Liban. Ce n'est pas les mêmes lois, ce n'est pas les mêmes choses. Je ne parle pas de ce projet-là. À la limite, on aurait pu ne pas le prendre, on aurait pu ne pas le faire. Le problème, c'est que on a engagé des dépenses et on est confronté, on va vers la ruine. C'est une coopération qui risque de nous ruiner parce que ce qu'on a appliqué au Liban n'est pas autorisé dans le pays européen. Donc, cette coopération doit s'équilibrer d'une manière ou d'une autre et le dialogue doit se faire avant quand même. Je peux peut-être après, avec CGLU, développer un peu plus les choses, mais on se sent démuni face à un bailleur qui fait sa loi. Et je ne parle pas en fait des techniciens avec qui on travaille, mais je parle des services financiers avec qui on travaille. Voilà. Merci.
Merci Béchir. Très important, en fait, oui, on doit voir comment on peut inclure cet aspect-là dans notre papier, dans notre travail. Et pour la conversation avec l'Union européenne, je pense qu'on pourrait parler de ça aussi. On travaille dans le cadre des plateformes dedans, et moi je suis sûre que Lucie reconnaît ces choses-là aussi. On doit se parler, mais je pense que pour le moment, pour l'instant, pour cette discussion-là, c'est important de tenir ça en compte, de prendre ça en compte et de voir comment on peut inclure cet aspect-là dans notre papier pour l'avenir. Merci, Béchir, pour cette expérience réelle que tu partages. Très, très important et intéressant. Mais on se reparle pour ce cas individuel. And now I would like to go towards the last segment of our meeting. We've got Barbara Samuels, our Ubuntu advisor. She's working with us on how to influence finance and what do we need to do? What are our arguments? I think, Barbara, you have heard many things. I hope you found it interesting. We're looking forward to hearing from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Amelia. I sit here once again, inspired but overwhelmed. I really congratulate the wide spectrum of input and really moving points. And I learn in the process, and I thank you. But I do think you talked about solidarity, you talked about transformation. That means we have to change business as usual. For years, for decades, development partners have been working on long-term solutions, trying to increase the creditworthiness of cities, the financial autonomy of local and regional governments, increasing economic activities, which then would increase own source revenues for local governments, increasing access to municipal markets. But let's be honest, this is an extraordinarily long process. And most of our local governments will never get a credit rating. They will never be able to access. There's too much dependency. The house is on fire. If we're going to actually deliver on the global agenda, we have to take action now. So I think just to set the stage, we have to understand what are the impediments. I think if you did a statistical analysis of what actual money, dollars and cents, local currency, went from a development partner, from a development finance institution, or bilaterally to a local or regional government, you would come up in terms of dollars and cents, almost nothing. Business as usual is technical support, best practices, peer-to-peer exchange, giving equipment, grants, okay? It's very, very little. Why is that? So I'm going to make some statements about why it is and why it's not going to change. Okay, but what then can we do about it? So local and regional governments are largely locked out of access to direct dollars, local currency. Why? Number one, as you all know, the entire development finance architecture is based on the nation state. And of course, you see this in the World Bank, in the regional development banks, the whole process. So for example, look at the World Bank program in Cameroon on inclusive cities. It's $160 million. Those dollars go to the Ministry of Urbanization and then are channeled down. So the usual way, even AFD, Agence Française du Développement, mainly goes through the national government. There's very few direct loans, except to, for example, Kampala, that has reached a certain level of creditworthiness. So that's a big issue that I don't think is going to change in the short term, at least. Another determining factor which creates rigidity in the system is what we call ticket size. transactions at the local and regional government level are too small for development partners to just logistically deal with. There are economies of scale. So, so for example, if you look at the European Investment Bank, their usual required ticket size, the size of a project, is at least 20 million euro. If you look at the Green Climate Fund, they consider a small project, and they don't like small projects, they consider a small project between 10 and $50 million. So you have a disconnect here between what the local government is doing and what development partners are willing and able to consider for direct funding. There's a third requirement, the need for a bankable legal entity. Okay, if you're creditworthy, if you're Johannesburg or Cape Town or Kampala, you may be able to access on balance sheet a bit of direct finance, but it's very, very limited. So if we're trying to address the issue for the wide majority of local and regional governments, we have to think, what is a bankable legal entity? Now, the fact is, even in Europe and the US, most direct finance will go through utilities, special purpose vehicles. I think it was Mercedes who mentioned PPPs, corporates, SMEs, NGOs, banks, microfinance institutions. Usually finance goes through a bankable entity. So if we look at the kind of rigidity in the system, are there solutions? And there's a ton of solutions. And I think, I think it was Boris who talked about the EU. The EU is a wonderful example of how local governments access finance, including through local government agencies. Same in the US and other places. And I think the wonderful opportunity with your policy paper is to really push the envelope on how to scale up what works today. So let's think about that for a second. Some points. Number one, how can we leverage—
I only give you 1 minute to make those points.
Okay, Amelia, sorry. One is leverage the funding today that development partners are committing for the global agenda, whether it be the SDGs, the ND, the national determined contributions, and new action agenda. And you can do that through earmarking at the national level. But again, solidarity, advocacy, you've got to push in multi-partner strategies for that through your grouping as local governments, as well with development partner working groups in country, very important. Two, aggregate projects, work together on your projects, put some together so they meet ticket size. Think about what your accountable legal entity is going to be. And this works, it happens all the time. Also through national programs, you can do a national municipal program and get funding that way. On lending and guarantee programs, a lot of development cooperation funding goes through local banks and microfinance institutions. You need to create projects that are acceptable to those banks and microfinance institutions to access those development funds. Blended finance structures, very important. Development partners don't want to just give grants, they want to leverage the private sector. So being able to work with finance experts, we talk a lot about local finance hubs to be able to structure those entities. And of course, subnational banks and subnational funds, Fenditur, FECAM, there's a lot of examples here. So I would really focus on creating the vehicles that development partners find acceptable and scale. Now is your moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I think it is really worth looking into these kind of messages also as part of the renewal of the kind of role that we want to play. But I also think we need to admit, and I will let the mayor of Kitchener go into this maybe later in his wrapping up, but I think we need to admit that we also want to change the system. So it's there is a part of us doing things differently, yes, but I think there is a part of the system needs to change, because if you really want to address the urban era, and urban era, as we know and has been said in the chat, is not the big cities only, we will need to change the rule of the game. And I think that's the case we need to build, and we hope to make it with you. In the meantime, you have given really very interesting inputs about the scaling up what we already do. And I think Stan is good inputs for what we are doing together. So allow me now to go to Jaideep Gupta from the Institute for Development Studies. Thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And really, I wanted to add my congratulations to you and the team for bringing together such a successful gathering. Many hugely informative points from contributors around the world, and really the points raised, they reaffirm and triangulate the important discussions we've already been having in this process across the membership, across a wide group of stakeholders. And your contributions, Amelia, but also the success of this meeting really bode well to position the policy paper as a co-created initiative. Very briefly, wanted to highlight 3 points in addition to all the very many important points that have already been raised. The first is on the training of a cadre of local and regional authorities in the core values of peer-to-peer reflexive learning and decentralized cooperation in a way that places reflexivity and cooperation as desired objectives, but also as the means to achieve those objectives, right? Development cooperation stakeholders, we all share this responsibility to encourage healthy bureaucratic mobility, involving opportunities for national stakeholders at the local, regional level and vice versa, but also, importantly, laterally across sectors, across departments. And of course, where such mobility already exists, it was really good to see those successes celebrated and those lessons shared. And where it doesn't, at least to the desired extent, we can advocate for this type of mobility as a new modality in decentralized cooperation, and of course to do so in gender-sensitive ways. The second point I picked up from the discussion today was a need for metrics and indicators that are simultaneously useful for evaluation on the SDGs, etc., but also provide some kind of granular input that support local advocacy. Too often our evaluative frameworks are disconnected from advocacy efforts. And so we need to support data and metrics that are both individual and collective, I suppose that are outcome and process oriented, that capture people's everyday realities and can provide a roadmap for local, national, regional authorities, and of course across urban, peri-urban, rural geography. So this is a complex task, but it is achievable. And lastly, a very final, very quick point, and of course, not the least very important one, is that COVID-19 and the public health response make this a real moment for international and local cooperation. And as we've heard, there are many national priorities that are taking shape, and these are new. And who would have thought that this final decade of achieving Agenda 2030 would become this critical? And of course, members gathered here and networks of cities and local governments have key diplomatic expertise that they've built over long periods of time. And the contributions today have really underscored that cities and local authorities are important to post-pandemic recovery, not only because they're on the front lines, but also because they are key diplomacy actors to bring us together. And Amelia, with that, I'll hand back to you so we can hear the final closing comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I very much agree with you that we need to highlight the experience, the vast experience that we have already. And that is something that we might not do enough in this kind of papers, where we focus on the asks of what we want, but maybe a little bit less on what we know how to do. Stan, very quick thoughts from the perspective of the CIV Secretariat. I hope you found the session useful.
Yes, I would be happy. Thank you, Emilia. And just maybe half a minute to just warmly thank everyone who took the time to join this session, to share thoughts. I think it's very useful and it will really enrich, I think, the policy paper. And just also once more, because I promised Peter to really stress that he really regrets being not able to be here, but these are conditions which lie out of our hands. So he would be very happy to engage once more. And again, we're always happy to receive additional feedback, additional thoughts as CIB Secretariat. This was just one of the occasions we really want to use to collect indeed the perspective of the network. We have an interesting workshop coming up on June 6th. Of course, we'll pay a lot of attention to the policy paper at the World Council later this year. And we're always open to exchange on it. That's something I wanted to share with you. Thank you, Emilia.
Thank you, Stan. And now, Barry Rabanovich, the mayor of Kitchener, and as our treasurer, a member of the presidency, some final thoughts.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Emilia. And I have a few reflections on today's session. But I want to begin by thanking Stan for jumping in and for filling in for Peter on short notice in particular. You did a great job, and please give our thoughts to Peter when you next talk to him. I think it was Mercedes near the beginning that talked about how we've grown over the past decade as a development cooperation community. And I think we all know that this is certainly the truth. I remember one of our early meetings, even before CIB was created, and we were ecstatic if there were about 20 people in a room. Today, at the height of today's call, I think we reached 124 people, and now an hour and a half later, we still see 116 Zooming with us on this issue. So in many ways, I think today has become the Mona Lisa of development cooperation, and it's really a testament to the work of each and every one of you on this call that you're doing in your cities, in your associations, in your networks, and in your countries for the work that's being done. As has been noted, work has been going on for many decades, but was formalized through the 2013 UCLG Policy paper on development cooperation. And in the 8 years since, the international context and the UN agendas have evolved, and each of you have really touched on that. You know, when I go back to the early days of this work, we often talked about North-South cooperation, but now we talk not only about North-South, but also South-South, North-North, and sometimes as well South-North, because for those of us who have in particular been involved, we know in the North that there are many things that we can learn from our Southern partners and make them apply in our communities in the North as well. There's 5 key points that I'm going to make very quickly that I think really summarize. Much progress has been made in the past decade. In particular, I note Mercedes' comment about the work that's been done over the past 20 years in Spain with the new architecture that sees cities working with the 2 houses of parliament and so on in this space. This is something I think we can all work towards achieving in our own countries, in our own ways. Secondly, and I think all of you touched on this, and it would be hard not to, but the pandemic has profoundly impacted our work and should transform our work going forward. When we think about that, many of you touched on areas of the economy, employment, social challenges, issues of gender equity, issues of addressing racial and socioeconomic equity, and of course the urban-rural divide that's been touched on. Lucy talked about a push for investment in cities with our governments, and this is something that really I think reflects our third point, and something that we continue to have a battle on. But that push for investment in cities also talks about continued investment from our donors and continuing to build that relationship on the ground so that we can continue the great work that cities are doing in cooperation. It was Colale that talked about the importance to show value of money and our accountabilities, in particular towards our donors. But the other piece that we can't lose sight of is really my fourth point, in not only that accountability, but also the importance to acknowledge, to tell the story of the work that we're doing. It's important for the residents in our communities. It's important for our donors. It's important for our national governments. And not only from a promotional point of view to acknowledge the value of that work, but also to share knowledge amongst each other. And the last point that I want to make, and I think this call and all of us on it is a reflection of that, the continued importance and value of our networks, and the role that those networks have to play in terms of fostering cooperation amongst cities, amongst each other. And I would be remiss in raising that issue of not thanking both BNG and FCM for their ongoing leadership of the CIB working group, but also Amelia, you and the UCLG team, because collectively both of these groups have ensured that this important work continues over not just the past 8 years, but in particular over the difficulties of the past 14 months. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Brabanovic, also for your kind words. I don't make a difference between the permanent working group CIB and UCLG. We are one and the same, but I am truly grateful for the inputs from BNG International and FCM. It is the members that champion our work. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. And I am very happy that we are learning how to enhance the connection between the technical work that we do and the political leadership that we need to make it meaningful and successful. How we are learning to interpret the vision of our political leadership in our technical work is really, really important. I want to encourage you all to participate also this afternoon in our session on migration. We are going now to a very important session, control session of the Financial Management Committee. That is a closed meeting for a group only, but this afternoon we have an open session at 5 o'clock. I would like to thank my own team, the policy team, and in particular Jean-Baptiste Buffet, who has been following the work of the CIB and the preparation of this session. And I want to recall that we have Jessie Post is not with us because she's on maternity leave, but she's very much heart and soul together with Stan of the work that we have presented to you today. We are humans, and it's worth recalling that. Thank you to all the Secretaries General that have been with us from MEWA, from ASPAC, dear Mehmet, Bernardia. I have seen Jean-Pierre among us as well. Thank you, everybody, and please do join us this afternoon. And thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Adiós, gracias. Chao.
Adiós, cuídense mucho.
Muchas
Y
gracias.
vengan mañana, que es el High Level Segment con muchas sorpresas. Many surprises tomorrow.
Bye, Ms. Amin. Bye.
Bye.